On Wednesday, the UK Supreme Court decided that I was legally male. It no longer matters what papers I have, what medical interventions I'd had, how I understand myself to be, or how I live my life. It was important to strip me of recognition to bring clarity to the law. What the court also tried to say was that the impact of their ruling was extremely limited, as trans people would still be protected by provisions in the Equality Act. But all of it, the ruling, the attempts to limit its impact, are fundamentally untrue. Because if you base a decision by saying that trans women are men, that will have ricochets throughout the system. And sure enough, the following morning, the chair of our brilliantly now misnamed Equalities and Human Rights Commission was on national radio saying the ruling clearly meant that trans women should not use any women's single spaces or facilities, because if I deigned to enter one of them, the space would cease to be single sex. And later on Thursday, the British Transport Police announced that when strip searches of trans women were required, they'd now be carried out by male officers. Well, that happened a lot quicker than I thought it would. But it's not surprising. But the reaction was interesting. I have many women friends. Not all my friends are trans women or LGBT people. I actually seem to fit in quite well with society. And around me, I suddenly saw all the other women, the women who were still legally women, start to ask questions. How would the British Transport Police know who was trans? How would they know who wasn't? What would happen if a woman who wasn't trans couldn't prove they weren't trans? Weren't trans women simply now going to deny that we were trans? Legal clarity, my arse. Harassment of women. This is not a step forward for women's rights. This is a massive step backwards, because women will be policed by how they look, how they behave, whether they fit in, whether they meet men's standards of beauty. We've had a lot of discussion this afternoon about the definition of biological sex. Well, there isn't one. Because you can't. Because human beings are wonderfully diverse. We're all unique. Except for me, maybe. We're all unique. Hardly any of us knows what chromosomes we have. We don't really know. Well, we're not arrogant enough to assume that we know everything about biology. Not arrogant enough to assume that we know everything about how human brains work, about the interaction of brains and the rest of our bodies. And it's that arrogance which underpins this judgment and the awful philosophy that has led to it. Now I, and every other trans woman I know, will continue to use women's facilities. Because the court cannot take away my knowledge of who I am. It can try and tell me I'm a man, and that's just stupid. It is just stupid. And the piece that I wrote ended, I wish I'd put in, I'll add in a little bit now which I wish I'd put in, but Michael Rosen wrote in 2014, "Fascism arrives as your friend. It will remove anything you feel is unlike you." Well, Britain, I hope you enjoyed your brief journey into the 21st century. Welcome to Gilead. Stay strong.